go around to the panel and have them do a very quick introduction of themselves. Melinda, you want to start us?
I'm executive editor, West Coast and Nashville for Billboard Magazine.
Great. Rich, I saw you there, Rich Neeson.
I'm here. And hi, Melinda. Haven't seen you in a long time.
I know, hey,
In any case, I'm a tour manager, touring professional. I've been a tour manager, production manager, tour accountant, jack of all trades. But as you can see, I've never done set design. So,
All right. And there's Porter Carroll.
Hi, I'm a percussionist for Hall & Oates and formerly of Atlantic Star.
And a session player. And
Yeah, done those things too, and a songwriter for CBS for a time. CBS Sony. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Tanya Bannister. Tanya, I'm sorry.
Hi, everyone. So I'm president of Concert Artists Guild. So we are launching, top young musicians into the marketplace. So yeah, and I'm a pianist as well. I was on their roster, so I kind of know what everybody's going through.
That's great. And Eric Williamson.
Yes, hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Williamson, East Coast, Brooklyn, New York, representing. I'm a conductor with the Brooklyn Youth Chorus. I am a professional singer, and I am a music teacher in a public school. So all of the things.
All the boxes.
This is a wonderful group, and before we get into the information that they can all provide us, I want to go through some economic facts, just so that we kind of establish what a incredible impact that this pandemic has had on the industry and on the individuals involved. Right after 2 years ago, I think the first thing that hit me as far as how large this pandemic was when South by Southwest announced that they were shutting down. That was like, wow, this is big. This is really hitting us hard. And the promoters of South by Southwest lost $27 million with that shutdown. But the Austin, Texas economy lost more than $350 million because of South by Southwest. And that's the hotel business, the restaurant business, the parking, the gas, the taxis, the ushers in theaters. And we all know so many people who have been affected by this. Coachella was shut down. The Stagecoach Festival was shut down. The French Quarter Festival. The Metropolitan Opera canceled their 2021 season. Broadway shut down. As Joe had mentioned before, the NAMM convention was postponed and then I believe shut down. The Billboard venue closure list has over 100 venues listed, and you combine that with the restaurants, bars, and clubs and venues of all sizes that have been shut down, that many may never open again. So we're seeing that return, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But also the ticket sales lost alone in 2020. Pollstar reported that $9.7 billion was lost in ticket sales. Another $30 billion was estimated to be lost from sponsorships, concessions, merchandise, and other ancillary factors. So you can double that because we also had 2021. So anyway, that's the overview of it. And let's talk a bit now about getting a little more personal about it. And I wanted to ask Melinda, because she's attended more live music and diverse shows in her work at Billboard and as a journalist in music for years. What's your reflection on what live music means to all of us?
I think it means more than we could have ever known. I mean, I think we all have our favorite places. Like my favorite place is in the pit at a Springsteen show. I've seen him 52 times. It gives me, it is a sense of humanity for me and a shared sense of community. And I think we all realized, and I say this, I have to say this with the full knowledge of how lucky I've been. I don't make my living from touring, so I did not lose money, or lose my livelihood. So my loss was as someone who covers the industry, but also as a fan, and it was a profound loss. It was profound. I still haven't gone back to shows. It was profound to not be able to be with members of my tribe, of whomever I would have been seeing, and making that connection, hanging out with friends, and just having that feeling that music provides that no other, I can't get any other way, where it just washes over me and I feel like I am part of a community. And so it was an emotional loss for me, but I certainly can't pretend to have had the kind of losses that even other people on this panel have had in terms of loss of income, loss of just my ability to make a living.
Eric, your work with the Brooklyn Youth Chorus, you can reflect on, and also as a performer yourself, as a tenor, as a touring musician and singer, that tell us about that vulnerability that you see both for your own sense, but also for your students.
Absolutely. The pandemic was a very terrifying experience for me. It was almost like the carpet was pulled up under me and I was left with nothing. Not being able to use my voice as a person on a stage, in a chorus, as a conductor, not being able to use my voice in a classroom, in a rehearsal room, not being able for 6 months to be in the same physical space as my students, not being able to be in a physical voice lesson or a coaching. It was really devastating. And I for several months, I wasn't sure exactly what to do. No one was prepared for this. As an educator, we just had to figure it out with little to no resources. So it was very jarring and shocking. And later on in 2020, when educators were forced back into the classroom with even more question marks, it was very abrupt being back in a space with my students, not being able to hug them, not being able to see their faces, not able to hear their voices. And me as a singer and an educator, even using my voice, I ended up having a vocal injury because of overuse with my voice, having the mask on, having to speak and sing all day with the mask for several hours. I ended up having a vocal injury, which sent me even into a deeper spiral of what's going on. So it was very difficult, but in spite of all of that adversity and challenges, there was also wonderful opportunities for me to rethink my teaching, for me to rethink my artistry. This has now become my stage. I've learned so much about myself, about my voice, about reclaiming my voice, how I use my voice, using it powerfully in digital spaces, and finding creative ways for me to express myself where people still feel me, even though they can't experience me physically. So I really learned. I'm grateful. At this point, I'm grateful for the pandemic because I'm a better human because of it. The good, the bad, the ugly. Now I'm in front of this wonderful screen with this light and set up in front of you all. So, it's definitely provided many opportunities and access to different spaces that I didn't have available before.
That's great. Tanya, you worked with these extraordinary musicians, the highest level of talent, and what was it like to have the isolation from performing for your clients?
Well, I mean, the musicians that we represent, many of them are still in school. So they at least had their isolated community in that. But I think it was incredibly difficult and eye-opening for that generation of musician to figure out, to also have their bubble kind of burst with this idealized version of what they think that a career can be for them. And obviously, there are years that it is incredibly lucrative and robust in terms of performance. But I think what the pandemic showed them is really the constant hustle that has to happen. But I think that, many really wonderful things were learned through that period. I think that the classical music industry really had so much catching up to do in terms of communicating with audiences beyond just this kind of archaic stage and kind of veneer of, just I play through my music, which of course is, incredibly important, but, being able to communicate with their audiences through the screen, through their social media accounts, which most musicians are, kind of, I don't do that kind of thing. So I think that, the reality check for many musicians and more accessibility, I think, has happened because of this, that I hope will bring in different types of audiences and different types of performers who are hustling and not just sitting under a rock, hoping that the world will come to them. I mean, I think those are the types of differences that we've seen, the people that rise to the occasion, that want to communicate despite what's going on around them, and those that just get back into their cocoon. And I think many wonderful musicians had that for a while and went through their ups and downs through it, but that's what I've seen.
Interesting. Porter, you were actually out on tour, a very successful tour during COVID. And
Right.
can you tell us what that was like, what it was like to be in the bubble?
Oh boy. I mentioned to someone that I'm a sports fan, so I was lucky that I watched the NBA, and I watched how they created a bubble in Orlando, I believe it was in Disney World, to continue their season the year before we actually went out. And I was able to kind of lock into what I was hearing about them doing, and that was just creating their own pods, within their teams and within their organizations, to just try and stay around people who were, try to remain as safe as they could. And that's what we did. Fortunately, I think I mentioned to you before, is that fortunately we get along at Hall & Oates. So so there was this, if we're going out to eat, if you didn't eat alone, you could call somebody and have, some human contact while we were out, in some restaurant that you're terrified of. I mean, and standing on those lines, what we would do is we were tested before each show. You get a rapid test before each show. And it reminded me of being in school and, did I study enough for this test? You know what I mean? Because everybody is literally, 30 or 40 people were in our organization are literally standing there at the doorway of said arena, and you're getting swabbed, and you're waiting 15 minutes to see if you could go in and play that night. That was nerve-wracking. It was nerve-wracking, but fortunately, we toured the last part of the year. We went from August through the first week of December, off and on, and we had no cases until the very last week. And I was one of those cases, and I missed the last job at the Beacon Theater. But unfortunately, it was very mild and all of that. But it was in hindsight, the anticipation was worse than the reality. We were able to hold serve. I like to call it. We were able to hold serve, and so we were very, very fortunate in our time.
You had mentioned to me the other day we were speaking. You mentioned just the impact of seeing a packed house. How scary that was.
It was, it was beautiful and terrifying. I mean, Hall & Oates, they're in a complete resurgence. So everything was 10, 12, 15, 20,000 people every night. And I think I saw one or two arenas where I saw a few empty seats. And I mean, we did the Hollywood Bowl. That's 18,000 seats. I mean, it was, and you could just feel the appreciation. I think you had mentioned that earlier, Melinda, that you know, just coming out onto a stage, and yeah, you have crowds that are that large, you're going to feel it. But this was different. There was something that was saying, thank you so much for taking the effort and staying in shape enough to entertain us this evening. And we feel so fortunate to have you standing in front of us. You could feel it was palpable. It was unbelievable, actually.
So as Porter was on the stage, the guy who is behind this,
You know, Rich.
Saving the background for last.
Rich, I know you were out also, I think with Tommy James and the
Dr.
Sean.
James this last summer and fall, yeah.
And can you tell us some of the challenges that, you know, like Porter mentioned how that have impacted him,
Well,
but
it's a little bit awkward because in Tommy James's entourage, the word bubble doesn't enter the equation. We are a mixture of very different people with very different views across the spectrum.
Oh, okay.
So some of the band members, some of the crew members were, you know, anti-vaccination people,
Ooh.
and some were staunchly vaccination, like myself, you know, pro-vax. And so we had a strict rule of, you know, political discussions were not welcome within our midst. So it immediately meant that the general atmosphere was, I'm wearing my mask everywhere all the time. I'm sorry, no matter what.
Oh yeah.
You know, and in all the houses we went to, it was a mixture. And again, it ran by the political spectrum. Most of our shows are fly dates. Tommy only does 1 or 2 shows a week. So most of our shows are in, you know, out of the way places. A lot of times we were not really playing in major markets. So again, we had a mixture of people who were very observant of the rules and a mixture of people who weren't. So personally, I was being tested before and after every trip we made, just for my own personal safety, because I was a very early adopter. In fact, 2 years ago this week, I was, 2 years ago next week, I was hospitalized with the virus. So I got sick early. I got really sick and I survived it. And so I was extremely cautious about that, but that's more about my personal stuff. In terms of the touring side of it, what we really saw, very, very different from Porter, is a much reduced audience. Tommy's demographic obviously is older than Hall & Oates is, and it doesn't cross the same spectrums that Daryl and John do. Tommy's you know, audience is largely my age, your age, Dan. You know,
mine too.
Yeah,
I'm in it. I'm not going to fake it.
So whereas on a normal run of dates, you know, we might have seen like a 10% no-show. You know, if we're doing 1,500 or 2,000 seats, you'd have maybe 150 or 200 people who didn't show up. Here we were seeing almost half a house, where we sell 1,500 or 1,600 tickets, and we have a drop count of 950. You know, so a lot of people were really, really wary of going back into those environments. Tommy, who's extremely effusive and likes to go out and spend time at Merchant talking to people, wouldn't leave the stage except in one song. He would go into the audience very briefly, walk across the front row, you know, and you know, get back on stage just to have a little bit of interaction. Now, having said all that, like Porter, it was an absolute joy to be a part of making people's lives a little bit better. And it was a thrill to stand there, even in front of 800 people where there should have been 1,500, and know that I was, you know, helping them come out of this whole thing in one piece. So that was an important part of it for us.
All right, Melinda, you speak to an incredible array of people in the industry: musicians, celebrity artists, executives in the business as well. And what did you see is the kind of the overall impact and how people were dealing with this on a performance level?
feel like it was just a devastating impact. Absolutely devastated. Artists were devastated that they couldn't go out. You know, many of them tried to keep their crews on retainer, you know, but a lot of them could not. They didn't, you know, some of the superstar crew artists who were very wealthy are able to do that. But I remember at one point, Zach Brown, you know, posting a very teary Instagram about how he could not keep his crew on retainer. And, you know, you think this is someone who's filling arenas and stadiums. And if he can't, then your average act is not going to be able to do that. Rich, do you want to break in?
I just want to add to what you're saying. I'm sorry. Thank you, Melinda. Is that Tedeschi Trucks Band did exactly the same thing, paying their crew salary throughout the pandemic. And then as things were lightening up, went back on tour in a truncated form with what they call their fireside sessions, strictly to raise money to keep the crew on salary.
Which, you know, that says everything about them that you need to know, right? You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
and I think we just saw devastation. I mean, we saw NEVA, you know, for those who don't know, it's the National Independent Venue Association, really rally around, and we saw artists rally around them to try to keep these venues. You know, Dan mentioned you know, that more than 100 venues closed, but way more than that were in trouble. And we're just trying to keep some of their skeletal staff, you know, because no one knew when this was going to turn around. So, you know, we were just doing story after story that was just heartbreaking. You know, I remember talking to a production manager who does some huge shows, and he's like, 2/3 of the crew people that I talk to do not have jobs anymore, and they're trying to find anything. They're working at grocery stores. They're trying, because most of them don't have insurance. You know, I mean, I'm so happy we're coming out of it, but the ramifications of this will last for decades. I mean, it was really devastating. You mentioned the $9 billion, at least double that, like you said, and just story after story, we were trying to find some hope, and a lot of times there wasn't any. It was just cataclysmically devastating for the industry.
Dan, if I can continue from there, 12 million people are employed in the live touring industry worldwide.
I didn't know that.
That's 12 million people who were out of work from this time 2 years ago until just recently. And in the course of that, you were talking about all the numbers of revenues lost. Well, that didn't even count the salaries lost and the families who had to suffer through all of this. But in the course of that, a lot of younger technical people have had to pivot and find new ways to use their skills. So as things are ramping up, what we're finding now is a shortage of qualified personnel to man tours.
Yes, we just did a story on that where you literally cannot, and there's also, as we know, supply chain demand issues. So you can't find crew, you really can't find bus drivers, and you very clearly want a safe bus driver and an experienced bus driver. You know, you can't find experienced riggers. You don't want a rigger who doesn't know what they're doing. So yeah, I mean, there's now, as everyone's trying to get back on the road, it's really hard to find,
Right.
you know, for those who did not keep their crews, or even ones that obviously need local crews in a lot of areas, to find the manpower to do it.
So people are pivoting out. I'm sorry. That's what they.
No, go right ahead, please.
No, are you saying that people had to leave
Mhm.
for, you know, for obvious reasons, but they're not coming back, is what you're saying?
Exactly.
Because out of fear or
No,
or just
once you pivot out,
uh-huh.
you get into a job and you find yourself at home and you're locked down for 2 years. Now you're home and you've got a
Yeah.
job that's actually paying you and maybe
Yeah.
has benefits. You know, we don't get insurance on tour.
Yeah.
You know that.
I know. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
So the incentives to go back to the kind of lifestyle that we've all been a part of, or at
Mhm.
least you and I specifically have been a
Mhm.
part of, you know, firsthand.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a lot of incentive to do that.
No.
I'm doing it because at my age, the only thing left for me is a greeter at Walmart.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, Rich. Yeah, so, gotta do this.
Back to those, I want to go back to the challenges we face going forward, but I also want to touch on the innovation, the decisions made that, you know, out of necessity that people have done. I know Tanya had talked to me about just getting these young classical people to engage in social media and learning other aspects
Oh.
of their career. And Tanya, would you talk a little bit about how you approached that and what your experience was?
Well, I think the most important thing that I think we all are kind of addressing is like, why do we do what we do? And what is our purpose? And if that is clear, then everything becomes a little bit easier, whether it's social media, making decisions about your programming, how do you connect to an audience? So I think it's really demands a kind of deep self-reflection and kind of observing what the community and the field needs from each, musician. And so we've really been pushing them to think about themselves as kind of musical citizens, which I know is a word that's thrown around a lot, but I think there's a reason for that. So yeah, no, we've definitely been training them from more practical things such as, how do you follow up with the presenter and make sure that you're helping them promote, so that it all comes down to money and helping everybody, right? And not just thinking about yourself and just worrying about an hour and a half you're on stage and then bye-bye. You have to be thoughtful to every step of a production of a show or a concert. So having them be a little bit more aware of that, I think. So we've done a lot more training and also we're talking in as an organization to a lot of the institutions and schools that are training these young musicians. And I don't know how it is, in other areas of the arts or music, but certainly classical music, they're really taught so little beyond how to play well. And that's not serving anybody. So I think that it has to be really looked at from a very young age and a lot more deeply. And I think that goes down to even just education as well, beyond music.
You had mentioned that, some of the creativity that's going into how a classical performer can present themselves differently now. And that would seem to be, just a sea in possibility.
Yeah. How do you tell your story through the music, And so we've actually started a series called Music Speaks that we present, and each musician comes on and, it's not limited to, they can play their Beethoven and Brahms or whatever it is they want, but they present it in a way that's, we give them license to really just go completely wild with their imagination. If it's history of the cello, well, let's think about that. Let's think about each of our ancestors as we go down like a piece of paper going down a well, and how can you tell that story in a way that makes us listen to things in a different way? So, I think it's exciting because what the pandemic has done, obviously it's been horrific for the arts, but the one silver lining I can see is that it's giving us this license to really just throw out what didn't work and to try new things. And I fear that, I hope that, the industry doesn't just play it safe and only try and book things that they know they're going to make money. So that's going to be the question going forward, I think, right?
Is it all about recouping now? To your point, Tanya, is that what they'll resort to? You know what I mean?
Will they? I mean, I think so. I mean, I have a friend, a phenomenal violinist that's always playing in Europe and England, and they now only want to program Vivaldi Four Seasons. I mean, that is literally, they really just want the blockbuster hits. They get in the audience.
Right. Yeah.
Are they going to do some wild things? I don't know if they can afford it at this point. So that's what I'm a little concerned about. This. Yeah.
Right.
I think to your point, Tanya, talking about innovation in classical music specifically, what people are really resonating with is what's real, whose stories are being told. And in thinking about innovation and social media, I have the privilege of working with young people. They tell their story every day on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
So, they're really kind of like spearheading this new way of us experiencing art and telling stories. And for me as a classical vocalist myself, that's kind of foreign to me. It's not something that's taught in school. Branding is not really taught in school. Who you are is not taught in school. So we kind of had, the pandemic allowed us an opportunity to kind of explore those things that we weren't taught. in a really unique way. And it provided some urgency because we had the global health pandemic, but we also had the pandemic of racial inequity and violence that was right in everyone's face. And us as artists were responding to it in real time. We didn't have the gigs, but we had social media to express ourselves, and that type of activism and our art as activism, and recording songs and being in the studio and doing the Instagram lives and doing the Facebook lives and having the conversations and applying pressure to our various industries. So right now, I really feel like that steam is still kind of going and blowing in terms of we want to see what's real. We want to hear real stories. We want to see people who look like us. We want to see people who have similar experiences. And I think it's really beautiful because before, especially classical music specifically, there were a lot more gatekeeping and ensuring that those stories weren't told, or it was a one-off of Porgy and Bess, and that's all you would see on the opera stage. But now there's a lot more intentionality behind what's being put on the stage, what's being programmed, who is playing, who is conducting. So it's my sincere hope that, it's not just a fad that is just the past couple of years, but something that we continue as artists, as people who are in the industry, as people who are educators, movers and shakers, to continue to apply pressure, because this is what art really is about. It's about being responsive. It's about making people feel something, making people feel seen in a time where we weren't able to go into opera houses, into stadiums to see shows, experience live music, even at a bar. The little things that we took advantage of, like we need to experience and feel the real at all times. And I think that's, what's really exciting about what the pandemic provided us, that opportunity to not only showcase who we are as artists, as individuals, but as a community of artists and of people to share that common humanity during a time of crisis.
Did this open the gate maybe for the students themselves to put forward ideas that the gate was open and that there's a virtual reverse mentoring that's possible, that these kids doing their invention on TikTok and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, they do it so fast and so quickly and so effortlessly that I am constantly learning. Things are changing literally every 2 weeks. There's something new out. There's some new filter, some new app, some new way to post or repost something. I'm just like, wait, how you do that? Wait, come show me how you did that there. So like they are constantly, honestly, it's a masterclass at all times, because the things that we're asking adults to do, kids are doing naturally without even knowing that they're doing it. Even the way they use hashtags, they're like, these are things that we have to learn and be like, oh wait, hashtags do that. They have that type of impact, and you can see who's watching and who's viewing. Like all these things that are not intuitive for a lot of us, myself included, they just come out the womb almost, it feels like, knowing how to really read the analytics of things and knowing how the impact of their posts, how many people it reaches, how many countries it reaches, like all of these nitty gritty things that a lot of us are playing catch up to, they already know the ins and outs of. So it really is a masterclass, even in creativity and innovation, because as a classical musician myself, this is not the way my brain kind of works all the time. Like, yes, when I'm on a stage and I'm doing this role and I have on a costume, yes, but putting on this filter and taking out the music in and out, like these kids are not only musicians, they're also artistic directors, they are also videographers, they are also video editors, they are also creative directors of their own content. And I think that it's really incredible and really inspiring that, within 15 seconds, we can see so much about their artistic voice, who they are as a person, what their interests are, what they stand for, what they don't stand for. It's really incredible, because this is not what I grew up having. And the pandemic just really amplified that amount of content and creative output that they're releasing. Because in schools, again, they still have on their mask, and thinking about the way the pandemic has affected us all, children are at the bottom of the totem pole. To give you more context, it was just in November that kids 5 and below could even get a vaccine. It was back in September where children 12 and up can get a vaccine. It was back over the summer that children 18 and older and adults 18 and older can get the vaccine. So just give you a little bit of context of how dangerous it still is to be a young person and how much more so they are in a pandemic than us as adults, as artists, and as professionals. They're kind of like the last wave to really experience what does it mean to not have their mask on. March 7th was the first day in New York City where masks are not being worn in school anywhere. But that was last week. Today's the 14th. So it's still a lot more catching up to do for young people who are also artists and who do the tours and the performances and are on stages. We're the last we're the last wave to really experience what that feels like. I've had the privilege as an adult performer to kind of experience what that feels like. But with kids, things are still a mess.
Yes. I want to go to Melinda to ask, as we move forward here, I think there's a real sense of optimism and enthusiasm, and we're hearing that on this innovation level. But do you see any other roadblocks moving forward?
The roadblocks I see are if another surge comes, obviously, or another variant comes. The other interesting roadblock is that booking agents are having to figure out, too many artists want to get back out on the road, and can the market sustain this? For example, I cover country a lot. A market can only sustain so many country shows a month. And so if you have, 3 superstars trying to get into arenas, like a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or Friday, Friday, Saturday, and the next Friday, is the money there, for people to do that. But it feels to me like it's 2019. You look at Coachella, you look at Stagecoach, no vaccine requirements, no mask required, no testing. So I think we're really going to see, did we try to open up too soon? But my kind of impression is, and I don't mean this horribly, but if you're a fan, you're on your own. You get it? You're on your own. There's something on your ticket that says you assume all risk.
Oh yeah.
And
disclaimers everywhere.
Yeah, that's it. Good luck. If you
Melinda's spot on with that. The finances, and even before the pandemic, traffic in a marketplace was always a concern when routing a tour. When I was working with Steel Pulse for all those years, we couldn't necessarily follow the Whalers or follow, Tribal Seeds or Slightly Stupid necessarily into a market. We had to pace ourselves and route things, so that we were the only game in town, so to speak. Well, that's even more the concern. And it's amplified by the simple fact that people have been postponing shows constantly for the past 2 years. So all of these shows that have been rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled again are now finally happening, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
We just had, in my current situation with Tommy James, he just had a tragedy in his own life, and we had to cancel a series of shows. We canceled 5 shows. Only 2 of them we were able to reschedule this year.
You can't get the venue, right?
Huh?
Because you can't get the venues, right?
Right, exactly. As soon as we had to cancel, that date was given to someone else who'd been waiting. So even if okay, we can go back, we can do these dates. There was no open availabilities for us to have, and I'm sure we're not the only ones experiencing that problem.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that if I can.
You're going out on 2 different tours coming up, correct?
Yeah. Well, it's 2 different artists, 1 band. It's gonna be Daryl Hall with Todd Rundgren opening for Daryl, and us, the band. Right now I'm in the midst of learning all of Todd's show.
Good luck.
As soon as I leave here, I'm back into his thing. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that one. No, I don't remember that one. But you know how that is. Trying to memorize things is a trip. But anyway, to your point, Melinda, about the glutton of dates and can a market support. I remember John and I we were doing a sound check, and we were in one of the arenas, and how they have the tickers around, who's coming, right? And at the time where it was last year, but we saw that all these dates were coming in 2022, James Taylor, all of them, Steely Dan, all of their contemporaries, and he said, we beat the rush. Right. And so we're going to get it all in now. So guys, we're not going to do a lot next year. We'll probably do solo dates next year. Maybe a few things here and there because everybody's going to flood the market in 22. And sure enough, to your point, that's exactly, what's going on.
Scheduling for 2023 and
2023, yeah.
and talking about beating the rush. We're right at the end of our panel.
Already?
And you guys have been awesome. I mean, I could listen to all five of you for the next week. You know,
We certainly know how to talk, and we certainly could go on from here. All of us.
For being locked down. You need somebody to talk to.
lots of great music, live music coming ahead for us.